Thank you. This is the September 7th, 2021 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning. Board members present are Mr. Morrison, Mr. Judon, Ms. Grass, Ms. Richards, Ms. Vargas, Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Robinson. Present from the planning staff are Mr. Batchel, Ms. Ashby, and Mr. Valentine. These proceedings are being recorded. We ask those who speak identify themselves for the record. We'll conduct this meeting in usual fashion. We'll first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, usually the Board of Zoning Appeals treats the matter as being uncontested and passes it as a matter of course. If, however, the city recommends against the application or there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We'll then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. First, to hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Second, to grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And third, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. We have a couple of, we've got one application that's been withdrawn in consideration at this meeting. That's item number 4, B4, 430 Meeting Street has been withdrawn and will not be heard tonight. Also, we have item number 8, B8, 30 F Street has been deferred by the applicant and it will not be heard tonight. I would like to make a comment as to protocol on presentations. Our rules call for us to allow the applicant and anyone else in favor of the application to have a total of 10 minutes for presentation, and the opposition to have 10 minutes in their opposition presentation. And then the applicant has a rebuttal time of 5 minutes. Due to the number of applications tonight, we're going to follow that protocol, and city staff will keep record of the time. The first item on the agenda is item A1, review of the minutes of the August 17th, 2021 board meeting. Does any member of the board have any comments about the minutes of the August 17th, 2021 meeting? Hearing none, Mr. John moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison,
Aye.
Mr. Jadon,
Aye.
Ms. Grass,
Aye.
Ms. Richards,
Aye.
Ms. Vargas,
Aye.
Mr. Bennett,
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Second item on the agenda is 62 Church Street, Charlestown. Request a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a horizontal expansion, garden room, and vertical extension, hall, closet, exercise, laundry, that extends the non-conforming 6.2 foot south side setback 9 feet required. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow a two-story addition having a 43% lot occupancy, 35% limitation, existing lot occupancy 37%, zoned SR4. Mr. Batchelder.
Thank you. So this is a residential property on the east side of Church Street, just south of Trad Street. And this map shows the location of the property sort of in the middle of that block. And as you can see, there are a variety of lot shapes and sizes and in this immediate area. The property is zoned SR4. Some of the properties, well, I'll just say that within this area of Church Street, the SR4 zoning is what applies, and you'll see that in a minute. But some of these other properties in the area, in the neighborhood, have other zoning districts, but all of them have a 35% lot occupancy limitation. So just keep that in mind. Here is an aerial view. This does a good job of illustrating that most of the homes are set all the way up to or very close to Church Street. This house is set well back from Church Street, as you can see. Here's a view from the street, again, showing the house situated well back from Church Street, whereas the neighboring property to the south is right up on Church Street, and the property to the north, the home to the north, is closer, much closer to Church Street than 62. The zoning map illustrating the zoning for the property of SR4 in that area. And again, this does a good job of showing how this home, for whatever reason, I don't know the history of the home, but it sits well back from Church Street, unlike the vast majority of homes on Church Street. The applicant, in preparing this application, which involves not only a special exception to extend the building with a non-conforming building setback, but also a variance to allow the increase in the total lot occupancy of the building on the lot, has submitted this document. And I have blow-ups of each section. You can see the numbers illustrate the addresses of the property. So 62 is roughly in the middle of this drawing. And the drawing is, so this is a blow-up of the northern part of that drawing. And what the applicant has done is identify the existing lot occupancies for the neighboring properties. So right now, 62 Church Street has a 37% lot occupancy. House to the north, 29.7. Then moving north, 65.5, and so on. So you can see that there are very large lot occupancies in this area. And again, the limit from a zoning standpoint is 35% for all of these lots. On the south side of 62, you have other lot occupancies shown here. Some of them are at or below the 35% limitation. Most of them are above that limitation. And just on the map that I prepared, I X'd out the homes that do exceed that 35% lot occupancy on the east side of Church Street. So this is a site plan showing the existing home on the property. Church Street is on the left side of this site plan, front yard, and the house situated well back from the front property line, and a small backyard. And the other thing to point out is, I guess this small building here is apparently an old building. Maybe it was a privy at one time, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's existing. Now this site plan shows the proposed addition. This is a 2-story addition located right back here. It connects to the rear of the existing house, plus it connects to this privy, which right now I believe is a storage shed. And here's the next image is going to be a view looking from approximately somewhere in here back towards the back of the lot. So here is a view of that existing shed like structure at the back of the property. I think it uses the existing wall, I believe, on that south side property line as its wall, interior wall. Here's a close-up view. And a view of the backyard. The top view is looking south at that storage shed that abuts the property line of 60 Church Street. And then the lower view is a view of looking at the back of 62 Church Street. So these are floor plans, or site plan actually in this case, and floor plan illustrating the proposed addition. I've just gone ahead and highlighted the outline of the proposed addition. You can see that it ties into the existing house here. And then this is that storage shed structure that becomes usable condition floor area of the house once it's connected. And this is a view of the second floor, which is a smaller footprint. The applicant can explain in more detail the what this is looking at. And then again, I've highlighted the outline of the additions to help illustrate these. And I hope that I've done this correctly, but I think I have. So this is a view looking from the south side. So this would be a view looking from basically from the property line north. And you see the existing storage shed here. And that would be, I guess, the interior, because the property line is the side of that, the south side of that shed. That makes sense. And then this is a view looking at the back of the house with the addition outline. So just to illustrate, the second floor of the addition is smaller than the first floor. Just want to make sure that comes across clearly. And then there is some opposition to this, I believe, from the property owner to the south. And just to refresh your memory, I've included the section 54 110 subsection F from the zoning ordinance that just simply explains the special exception test that is to be applied by the board for an extension, a physical extension of a non-conforming, in this case, non-conforming building footprint with the rear addition. So the existing house sits 6.2 feet off that south side property line. 9 feet is required. And the second floor is a little further away from that south side. But anyway, it's still extending the non-conforming south side setback that exists on this property. And the board is to make a finding or determine that it's limited to extending or increasing the non-conforming use in existence, and 2, would not result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use. And then the board should consider the effect of the extension or increase on the properties in the vicinity to include traffic impacts, not applicable in this case, in my opinion. Vehicular and pedestrian safety, again, not applicable. Parking impacts, not applicable. The potential impacts of noise, lighting, fumes, or obstruction of airflow or light on the adjoining property, that one would, I believe, apply in this case. And the impacts on the aesthetic character of the environments to include the possible need for screening. Again, that's possibly one that would apply as well. The board, and I want to point out that this addition probably is my guess is it's probably not visible from a public right of way. I could be wrong about that. If it were not visible under normal circumstances, the BAR would not have any jurisdiction over the review of this addition. However, once the board hears a request for this type of extension and grants a special exception, it's automatically subject to review and approval by the Board of Architectural Review as well. I just want to add that as an additional step that would be necessary if the board was to grant this approval. So my recommendation is for approval of this request. I feel like this is to the north of the property at 60 Church Street. And that is the adjoining property owner that I believe is not in favor of this request. So the light impact on that property is very minimal to the extent that there would be an impact, and air impact, I believe, would be minimal as well. So I would recommend approval of this request. I believe it meets the special exception requirements, and I believe the variance is reasonable given the nature of property lot occupancies in the immediate area that are all subject to the 35% lot occupancy limitation. So for those reasons, I think this is a reasonable request. It's in line with how we've looked at these in other situations. The property sitting back from Church Street, you're very limited on where you could possibly build any addition onto this home. And it certainly wouldn't be allowed in the front of the property given the controls that the BAR has. And also in this case, and you'll hear from April Wood, but the Historic Charleston Foundation does have a facade easement on this home. So they have review authority over this addition as well, and they have recommended that it be approved. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. And I guess, well, I'll just let the chair move on.
The city recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is there opposition present?
Yes, Mr. Robinson. There is opposition present. I believe that Mr. Yates.
So we should just go ahead and hear from the applicant, I believe. This
So-
First, okay,
With that in mind, I'll hear from the applicant, and with the applicant, please be sworn in.
So Penny, that's going to be Skip Wallace
yes, it's going to be Skip Wallace.
and
And,
Erica Wallace as well.
Let's
I
see, I'm
believe-
looking right now.
And then the attorney's
I-
name.
Yeah, the attorneys. I didn't see where she signed up, but Skip Wallace has signed up.
Mr. Wallace, are you present?
So we need to promote him. If Scott, if you can do that.
I believe I have.
Mr. Wallace, are you present?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Mr. Wallace, would you please be sworn in?
Okay,
Skip, this is Lee Batchelder. So do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mr. Wallace, you and anyone else in favor have a total of 10 minutes to make your presentation. Please proceed.
Okay,
And before you do that, if you could also mention anyone else that we should promote as part of your applicant presentation.
okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can.
Can you see me?
No, cannot see you.
There's something I should do for that?
There should have been a request to promote you to panelist. You have to accept that, I believe. Yeah, I think about it.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Whew. Okay, so you can hear me and see me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, as way of introduction, my name is Skip Wallace. This is my wife, Erica. We've been here at 62 Church Street for 9 years. I'm a architect, registered in the state of South Carolina for 37 years. I have a studio on Broad Street that I occupy daily. My home quarters, my headquarters for my firm is up in Richmond, Virginia, and I have 9 people up there and a partner up there. So it's just me down here and my wife. So we've been working on this for about 4 years. And we, just as an introduction, I was on the preservation committee for my local county in Virginia for 26 years. So I take historic properties very seriously. I love them. That's why I'm here. This is over a 200-year-old house. It's got one of Latrell Briggs's latest last gardens back in 1974. We have the actual drawings on the wall. So we really feel like we are stewards to an amazing piece of property. We open it up to the public whenever we can. Historic Charleston Foundation uses it for its garden tours about 4 times a spring. We allow people to take pictures in the garden, wedding pictures all the time. We just feel like we're just here temporarily, and we're the stewards of this amazing caretaker of this amazing piece of property. It's a unique house. It's a very small house. It was never used as a full-time residence. What we are doing to it, we feel will bring it into livable condition for this type of lifestyle we have. Nothing has been done to this in over half a century. And I think we all live in a beautiful city and in a beautiful historic district in a beautiful city. And my feeling is that it's been successful because the committees have allowed people to do things like this, which brings a historic home, makes it a viable home for today's society. And without approvals to do things like this, these homes would become stagnant. And they become museums, basically. Sturbridge Village, it would just be a museum. And it wouldn't be the vibrant community that we have grown to love. We obviously can't do an addition on the front. We can't go to the sides. So the back is the only way to go. We're adding just one room on the ground floor, which one of the things about these Charleston singles is that they're just a series of rooms and the flow is usually pretty poor. So, and that's what we have. So this room we're adding would actually create a very good circulation path from the kitchen to the mudroom to our new room and back in the central hall to our den and to the rest of the house. On the second floor, which is almost the more important part for us, we get to have a laundry room and closets. And that's the things that are lacking in this house that make it so difficult for us. And we've committed to stay here the rest of our lives. So that was a reason for moving forward with this, spending so much time designing it, getting so much input from all the people we can. Eddie Fava's a friend, he helped us. So we've really spent a long time doing this. We feel like we got the right solution. We've got the support of April Wood and the Historic Charleston, and we just want to move forward with it. We have letters from our neighbors moving north up Church Street of approval. We have letters from someone who lives on Longitude Lane of approval.
And Skip, just by the way, I forgot to mention, but all of your slides all of the information that you submitted with your application is in this PowerPoint. If you want to refer to anything in the letters, we've included all the support letters as well.
Oh, okay. I did forget to mention that we do have two attorneys who are going to be representing us, and they are here too. So I should have told you that. They're with Trenham Walker, and it's Jennifer Ivey and John Linton, I believe. So they are waiting to be admitted as well, if that's possible. That in a nutshell is what we're trying to do. We've been here for quite a while. We walked around, my wife and I walked around yesterday in about a 5-minute radius, about 3 blocks either way from where we are. And we counted how many? 80 houses that have done something similar to what we're asking, which are 2-story additions to homes in the back. So it's something that, that is quite often done. And again, this house has not been touched in half a century. So this is what we feel we need to make this a home we can stay in for the rest of our lives. I don't need the full 10 minutes. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wallace from the board? Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of the application?
Yes, sir.
Hi, Jennifer, this is Lee Batchelder. I'll swear you in.
Great.
And are you the only one that will be speaking, or is there?
Lee, this is John Lenton. I may handle the reply if one is necessary, but if you want to swear us in together, that's fine.
Yeah, well, let me do that. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is Jennifer Ivey. We're representing Skip and Erica Wallace, and I want to just spend a couple of minutes running through the application of the special exception test, as well as the non-conforming use test. And as you've heard from Mr. Batchelder and our client Skip Wallace, this is a very unique property. You heard from Mr. Wallace. It's a 213-year-old property situated in the historic district and demonstrative of the Charleston single, built in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's also very small as compared to its neighboring properties. 62 Church currently consists of roughly 2,400 feet of conditioned space on a lot that is under twice the size. But what is so unique with this property, and you heard it from Mr. Batchelder and can see it in some of the pictures, is that this property, unlike its neighboring properties, is set back from the street, from the sidewalk. The property is home to a Latrell Briggs designed garden, which is the central feature of this property. And unlike the neighboring residences, it can't move in that space. It can't utilize the space in the front of the property. It's got nowhere to go but back. Also, unlike neighboring properties, it is so much smaller and so much older in its current design. The portion of the property that the Wallaces intend to add to on the rear of the property is actually not any part of the historic building. It's a more recent addition in what we view as a great improvement to that addition. And so the positioning of the residence at 62 Church is very unique among the other residential properties situated in the vicinity. And like Mr. Batchelder has recommended, it meets the extraordinary and exceptional condition test, the first aspect of the test. Likewise, these conditions do not apply to other property in the vicinity. The property is distinct by way of its setback, and the other neighboring homes are much larger and have been more recently modernized. The Wallaces have provided a listing of properties just walking around the floor block area of homes that have all had similar two-story additions. And you've seen from the lot coverage study that Skip Wallace prepared and Mr. Batchelder blew up in a way that most of the lots around most of the lots and residences around the Wallace's property are much larger and are taking up a much larger portion of their lot presently, and even as would be altered up to that 43% lot coverage. One example is the Wallace's neighboring property, 60 Church, the property to the south, who is here, as I understand it, to speak in opposition. That property, 60 Church, did the same thing, put an addition on the rear side of their house years ago, and the Wallaces did not object to that addition. In fact, they supported their former neighbor's application. It's such on Church Street that a lot of these houses have done these two-story additions on the back side. And what the Wallaces are looking to do here really speaks to the third and fourth prong of that test. This is a long, intentional, and well-planned design to make this property more functional and more beautiful than it already is. You see in their plans that they're looking to put another outdoor area, another garden feature to this home, as well as a garden room. And then on the second story addition, just some very functional aspects, a laundry area or area to expand for a laundry area, some closets in a much more modern size. And to speak to the last prong and also touch on the special exception test, the proposed addition would not be visible at all from 64 Church Street. You're not going to see this standing across the street or behind it. And so the character of the district will not be harmed by granting the variance, as this will keep the use of this property as a residential property, add another garden area, and really the neighbor's view is going to be enhanced. I think one thing that has been submitted in the package to you is a view angle study, which measures potentially how the light and view is going to be affected if you were sitting on that second floor porch next door. And so this is if you're turning your head all the way towards the Wallace's property and on that smaller star on the front left corner, sitting in the most restrictive position on that porch, looking towards the Wallace's. And so there is some minimal impact, as Mr. Batchelder indicated, on the light, which is really, if you're sitting on that back porch, more attributable to the heavy tree overhangs on that property. We think that the view is going to be enhanced overall. We do not believe that there's any easement of view recognized in South Carolina, and that this property is actually going to be enhanced by the proposed addition, and would ask for your support.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Ivy? I think that probably takes care of the 10 minutes.
That takes care of the 10
Yeah.
minutes.
Very good. Is there any opposition present?
Before we
Aye.
get to that, Penny, let me just, I failed to reference the letters of support like I normally would, but of course, we have the letter from April Wood of the Historic Charleston Foundation. They have the easement and they request approval of this application according to that last sentence. Then the homeowner at 64 Church in support. 66 Church Street is in support. 68 Church Street. And 69 East Bay Street, which is a property about a block away, but nearby. And then anyway, so I just want to reference those letters as well for the board.
Thank you. Is anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to the application?
Yes, Mr. Robinson, I believe it may be Mr. Hellman, Brian Hellman.
Is Mr. Hellman present? Mr. Hellman?
Could you maybe,
Can you hear me?
Signed up.
yes,
Thank you.
let me swear you in, Brian. Or is there anyone else that would be speaking in opposition to?
I'm here along with my client. I'm trying to, how do I turn the video on here?
It's on.
Well,
Okay.
you're only an attendee that is enabled to speak. So we don't necessarily promote you to be a panelist. That makes sense.
Now,
There you are.
you should,
Now you are.
very good, very good. I'm here. I'm ready to be sworn in, Mr. Batchelder. Thank you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Hellman. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Hellman. I'm here with Jonathan Yates. We're at 105 Broad Street. Also with me tonight are my clients, Teresa Mojado and Dane Neller. Ms. Mojado recently bought 60 Church Street and actually found out about this application, not from the Wallaces, but from her contractor when he noticed that the house was posted for this hearing, and he advised her of it. It's not surprising because most of the impact that this project imposes on its neighbors is on 60 Church. And 60 Church is not only to the south of 62 Church, but it also turns a corner at the rear of the property. So it's impacted not just on the north-south property line, but also the east-west property line at the rear of 62 Church. So as soon as this happened, Ms. Mojado reached out to us and asked us to take a look at the application because she had significant concerns about the impact that it was going to have on her house. And it's clear that the two-part special exception test and the four-part variance test are not met in this situation. Other issues also came to light, which further, we believe, support the denial of this application. Though it's not as difficult to satisfy as the four-part variance hardship test, I'm going to start with the two-part special exception test and why the application, we believe, fails, and we would ask that it be denied. Under 54.110F that Mr. Batchelder brought up, the controlling language, the non-conforming use of a building or structure cannot be physically extended to provide more area for the non-conforming use unless the Board of Zoning Appeals zoning finds that the extension or increase in the non-conforming use, number one, is limited to extending or increasing the non-conforming use then in existence, and number two, would not result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use. And then the board shall consider impacts such as traffic impacts, parking impacts, potential impacts of noise, lighting, fumes, an obstruction of airflow or light on the adjoining property, as well as the impact on the aesthetic character of the environs. So in looking at the special exception first element, the first thing that we uncovered here was that there are a number of businesses that are registered to this address. Mr. Wallace's architectural firm uses 62 Church Street as its listed address. If you go to his website, we actually sent some exhibits that can show the board this. I'm not sure if that's something that Mr. Batchelder can show, but it's we have a number of slides that show that 62 Church Street is listed as the address for Island Architects, both on their website and a number of, next slide, please.
Oh.
So this is the Island Architects website showing that the business use is occurring at this address. The next slide shows that Island Architects is registered with the LLR as its primary business address in South Carolina is 62 Church Street, that Mr. Wallace himself in the next slide has listed that as his address, that Island Architects, the next slide, please, on their drawings, architectural drawings show that 62 Church Street is its business address. And in the next slide, it shows that the vehicle registrations for Island Architects 2 vehicles are listed to 62 Church Street. In the next slide, Mrs. Wallace shows that on her email signature, 2 businesses are being operated at this address, both her interior design firm, Stone Ridge Interiors, as well as Island Architects. And in the next slide, her Facebook page shows that 62 Church Street is the business address for Stone Ridge Interiors. Interestingly enough, in the next slide, neither of those 2 companies have a business license according to the city of Charleston to operate anywhere in the city of Charleston, yet they identify those addresses as their primary business address. No business addresses nor any home occupation applications have been made to that address. Therefore, we feel that part of this application is really to intensify the effect of 2 unlawful, non-conforming uses. And therefore, the first element of the test is not met. The second element of the test, unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use, we believe is also not met. First, because of the impact that the operation of 2 businesses on this quiet and densely populated residential street would have, negatively impacting both traffic and parking on Church Street, that the special exception application that was requested, the drawings are unclear and confusing as to what the exact request is. And if we could turn Mr. Batchelder to drawing A2, you will see that the mechanical systems that are going to be used for 60 Church Street are located literally right outside of the bedroom windows of 60 Church Street in such a location. A2, please, sir. You can see the equipment, the 2 compressors located right there, and right across from those 2 compressors is 60 Church Street, merely about 5 or 6 feet away. Secondly, in drawing A10, you will see that the placement of the generator, now lifted and located in a corner with a wall right upon it, will impact the rear yard, pool house, and bedroom of 60 Church Street. A10 was in the package that was sent to us. It was also part of the application.
I don't know what happened to that.
Yeah, we believe that's an important drawing. You can see the generator lifted there right in the corner at page A7, perhaps. The height of the proposed addition will also negatively impact 60 Church by obstruction of light and airflow on 60 Church Street, its pool, its rear yard. This can be seen in drawing A0.2 and on the aesthetic character of the environs, all elements that the board shall consider according to 54.110F. Clearly, these improvements will result in an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use, as well as an unlawful intensification of the 2 unlawful business uses. So for that reason, we do not believe that the special exception test is met. Either element of the special exception test is met, and therefore the special exception should be denied. As it relates to the variance test, we do not believe there are any extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to this property. If you look at this property and you go back to the drawing, all of the properties that are to the north and south have approximately the same percentage of land being used. Very, very few are in the 40s that are in the 60, 58 Church, 60 Church, 62 Church, 64 Church. 64 Church next door is set back. 30 Trad Street is set back. 62 and 48 Church, I'm sorry, are all set back. The size, the shape, the topography are common among many Charleston properties, and therefore there are really no extraordinary and exceptional conditions, and this requirement hasn't been met. Even if the board were to find that there were extraordinary and exceptional conditions, and it's my client's position that there are not, the size and the shape and this topography are very common, as you can see in these drawings. There are a number of lots of this size and this shape throughout the vicinity and the peninsula. You can look at 64 Church, you can look at 30 Trad, you can look at 48 Church, and therefore this requirement has not been met because these conditions do apply to other properties in the vicinity. These conditions also do not effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. The property is presently utilized as a business and the operation of two separate businesses. Even as a residence, as it has been for over 200 years, it seems that there is no problem in doing so. Therefore, there is no effectively prohibit because it's been utilized. And as it relates to unreasonably restricting the utilization of the property, there is no way for this house, the inability of this house to function, whether in the future or as it has been for the past 200 years. There is no effective prohibition, nor is there an unreasonable restriction, and this requirement hasn't been met. The last part of the test is really the most important, that there can't be a substantial detriment to an adjacent property, and there is here a substantial detriment to adjacent property and the public good. First, our client is going to be harmed because of the location of the compressors, the generator, the effect of light and air on its backyard because of the nature of 60 Church Street being an L-shaped lot both to the south and to the rear of 62 Church. The applicant says this expansion isn't visible from Church Street, and they also made a point of saying it's not visible from 64 Church, where they got a letter of support. While this is not the standard, why does 60 Church have to bear the burden of the impact of this improvement while 64 Church receives no visible impacts whatsoever? 60 Church Street will be substantially harmed due not only to the height, scale, and mass of the proposed improvements, but also the placement of the mechanical systems right next to the master bedroom of 60 Church Street. Furthermore, there are two businesses that are being illegally operated in violation of long-established City of Charleston ordinances, which is clearly contrary to the public good and harmful to the character of the district. The fact that the proposed addition is not from Church Street has no bearing in the statutory variance test for a variance. Therefore, we do not believe that the fourth prong of the test nor the other three are met by the applicant. Our client is in a position that this is going to significantly harm them because of the nature of the improvements, where they're located, and the fact that they were really kept in the dark from the beginning on this. We hope that the board would find that the application is not, that the elements of the application and the special exception test and the variance requests are not being met by the applicant, and that it would deny this application.
Any questions for Mr. Hellman from the board? Was that 10 minutes, Mr. Batchelor?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
pretty
was.
much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hellman. We'll hear now rebuttal from the applicant.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Skip, this is John. May I take the rebuttal, please?
Oh, sure. Thank you, John.
Yeah. Good evening, John Linton, also here on behalf of the Wallaces. Mr. Hellman said that the neighbors at 60 Church Street have been kept in the dark. I just want to point out that this application was deferred last month at their request. And what's happened in the last month is that they've done research, and what they've discovered is that the Wallaces have a mailbox. They've discovered that they've used this mailbox for the last 9 years. And they're now coming to this board and they're attacking them, asserting that they're running businesses out of their house because they have their business addresses and their home offices at their home. You heard Mr. Wallace at the beginning say that he has an architectural firm that's headquartered in Richmond with a number of staff up there, full-time staff, and in addition, rents a physical location here in Charleston. The fact that they use their mailbox for business mail has nothing to do with this application. And the board, I hope, will not be distracted by that assertion that there's some illegal activity at the home. To the variance and special exception test, the special exception test, I want to focus on the fact that the non-conformity here is the side setback. It is not, as the objectors would have you believe, some sort of expansion of a business use. It is simply a side setback, and there has been nothing put in front of the board to suggest that granting that special exception will have any negative impacts. And as to the variance test, you even heard Mr. Batchelder remark that this property is different than the other properties in the vicinity. That this garden in front, this historic, beautiful garden that the Wallaces are stewards of, is what makes this unique. And anyone who walks past there knows that. This is a relatively modest addition to modernize the house, similar to the one at 60 Church Street, but smaller. There is just no reason not to grant the variance and the special exception. The four-part test is clearly met. Staff has recognized that it's met. The Historic Charleston Foundation has recognized that this is an appropriate addition to this beautiful home. And for those reasons, we would ask that you approve both of these requests. The assertion that the mechanical system is going to be loud or that there's going to be some issue with light is not backed up by any sort of empirical or other evidence. And in fact, if you look at the current site plan, you'll see that the air-conditioned systems are on the same side of the yard today as they're planned to be after the renovation. They're moving, but the idea that this is going to be some dramatic impact on 60 Church Street is just something taken out of thin air. So for those reasons, we would ask that all of the requests be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board for Mr. Linton? Okay, well, the public hearing portion of the meeting is closed. Mr. Batchelder, it seems to me that the contention on the uses that are occurring in the building really are not properly before us. We don't deal with those sorts of things. We're dealing with the request of a physical change to the property. So it's my feeling that we don't have to deal with any uses that may or may not be occurring in there other than residential.
I would agree with that.
Do you agree with me, Mr. Batchelder?
I agree with you on that.
Let me ask you on another issue. Did you hear anything during the opposition presentation that was news to you or shed a different light on your approval, your recommendation for approval of the application?
No, I did not hear anything.
Does the board have any questions for Mr. Batchelder or anyone else, or any comments?
This is Howell Lee. What is your view about the issue of mechanical systems and being close to the master bedroom?
Let me go down here. Let me go into let me see.
And Lee, maybe while you're doing that, maybe we could see where the existing units are as opposed to where they're going to be.
I think there's a photograph in here. I gotta figure out where I am in this slideshow. That's my slides up front. And there's that. Now we're getting into the applicant slides. And so I believe this plan illustrates the location of those units right now. So you've got this one-story building that you've seen in photographs. Back here is an AC stand and generator in this back corner. And I believe it's these units that would be elevated to the, let me just move on. So perhaps the units are in this enclosed space right back here right now. And they would be, and there's a view looking into that enclosed space that you just saw. This wall that you see is the back property line of 62 Church Street, and beyond is that L-shaped section of 60 Church Street. And another view, I guess that would be, I'm not sure what that is. Generator platform behind too, okay. So moving on, let me go back to the drawings. Sorry, lots of drawings to scroll through. So this is the deck area where the HVAC compressors would be relocated to, I believe. Any applicants could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Why do they have to be raised?
I'm not sure, but perhaps that would be a good question for the applicant.
But let me make sure I understand it. It's the same compressor unit or a bigger compressor unit or a second compressor unit required by the addition, and the same generator or a second generator. I'm lost on that.
I don't know the answers to those questions. So, but I will say that, again, if you look at the side view, I believe this is the existing parapet for that rear, the existing section of the house.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's true. And then these units would be on the other side of that wall. So they wouldn't have, there would be a wall separating those units from the adjoining property, I believe is the correct way of looking at that. And again, I'd like the applicants to maybe chime in on this point, if you don't mind.
Is the applicant still present?
Yes,
Could you comment on the questions, please?
absolutely, absolutely. We are not getting a second generator. We're just taking the same one we have. It's in the same location. We're raising it up. The two, it's low to the ground right now, which is bothersome. The two compressors are going to be relocated. They're in the way of the footprint right now of the addition. And one of them is a new one. The new one's very quiet and the other one is not. We're going to replace that one with a new one. These new compressors are whisper quiet. So they will be behind that parapet wall. That parapet wall starts at 6'6" high above the deck where the compressors are and rises at about 8 and 12. So they will never see these compressors, whereas they do right now. They can look down on our compressors, and the location in terms of relationship to the bedroom is almost similar. They're a little closer, but they do have that wall that would baffle the sound of them. And
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
your existing louder compressor is going to be switched out for a newer model, less noisy compressor. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
And the generator, I presume, only comes on in the event of loss of power.
That's right.
It's an emergency generator.
Absolutely.
We look out on there for generators in your home.
Okay.
Any other questions, any comments from the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is the neighbor's view, 60 Church Street, is the view from the bedroom going to be now the facade of the new addition? And is that substantially impacting their light?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Their bedroom is back from this porch. And in fact, the addition that we supported in 2016 actually has a window on the north side that looks directly into our bedroom. Their bedroom is back probably 15 feet from the back of that addition. So they're already looking at the side of our house. The view angle that's cut off by this addition would be almost minuscule because of the existing parapet wall. And they are to our south, so there is no sunlight being blocked because the sun is to our south and all shadows are cast to the north.
I have a question too for y'all, please. The letter of support that you received from the property owner on East Bay Street, was that the property owner to the rear of your property?
No, they're on Longitude Lane, but they are friends of ours and they're very familiar with the addition. And so I asked if they would write us a letter of support. They're on East Bay, but they are actually on Longitude Lane, which intersects with Church Street just north of our house. 3 houses up.
Thank you. And I have one more question, just to clarify about the second floor porch. Is that the very edge of their structure? Closest to where your addition will be? I'm confused about this drawing that we're looking at.
Oh, well, I did that. Sorry. It is kind of messy. I didn't know you were going to show it. Where Lee is pointing right now, that's their second floor porch right there, that rectangle.
And
So-
is that the farthest structure part of the building is what I'm
Yes.
trying to ask. Okay, so
Yes.
okay.
Yes, it is. That little section to the right was just something I was doing to study the view angle of somebody sitting on their porch.
Okay.
And we stepped our second floor back and did a sloped roof so that you can see the view angle is only 27 degrees from someone sitting in a sitting position.
Thank you.
Where will the HVAC units be relative to that second floor porch?
To their second floor porch, they'll be on the other side of the 6.5 foot alleyway and on the other side of a parapet wall that's about 14 inches thick. Right where the red dot is, where Lee's red dot is. Yeah. There are things I can do to help with the sound too. When we do these on Kiowa, we use sound baffles to help control them. So we could certainly do something like that to absorb the sound. Because I get it, you know, I don't want to hear compressors either, but the new ones are very quiet.
Any other questions from the board? Any comments? Any motions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Ms. Vargas, would you consider that with a condition that additional baffling be provided around the compressors?
Mr. Robinson, how would we measure or evaluate whether that condition is met?
Well, we're going on some good faith here, I believe, with the next door neighbor.
Mr. Wallace, what do you think about adding that condition? Is that something that sounded to me like it's something that you could accomplish?
He's muted.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd be fine with that because it would be something that I could deal with and make a lot better.
what would be the best way to describe that condition?
Are you asking me?
I'm sort of, I guess I'm thinking out loud. So maybe making commercially reasonable efforts to minimize or do implement changes that minimize any excessive noise. I don't know
Yeah.
if that.
And we can also purchase, high SEER ratings to get them even quieter, which we intend to do.
So if we say the condition that you purchased the high SEER ratings and make any reasonable
Sound absorption, sound barrier.
Yeah.
effort to further
We'll do all we can.
minimize.
Yeah, we'll do all we can to mute the noise and keep it down. We can even measure the decibels and compare it to a chart.
Okay, do my colleagues think that that would be acceptable to have two conditions? One, to purchase the high SEER ratings. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, SEER. Yeah.
S-E. So one, purchase the high SEER ratings and then make reasonable efforts to further minimize noise production.
I think I'd be more comfortable seconding just the second part of your proposal and not requiring them to, like, not
Not
dealing
adding
with
that
a
extra thing.
financial
Okay.
burden, or not burden, but just a condition.
Okay, I think that's actually a good point, because making reasonable efforts to minimize the noise would, purchasing the appropriate mechanism would be captured with that. So I think you're right, Ms. Gross. So Mr. Robinson, I will make the motion to approve with the condition that the applicant make reasonable efforts to further minimize the noise production from the generators and the mechanical units outside of 60 Church Street window.
Is there a second to that?
I second it.
Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Next
Thank
item on
you.
the agenda is 42 Halsey Boulevard, Harleston Village. Request variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with 7.4-foot south side setback, a 10.3-foot total side setback, having a 44% lot occupancy. 9 feet, 15 feet required, 35% limitation, zone DR1, Mr. Batchelor.
This is a vacant lot on Halsey Boulevard, just off Lockwood Drive and south of Montague Street, shown here on this location map. The zoning is shown here as DR1, similar to the surrounding properties on Montague, Halsey, to the south and north of this property. And as you can see, this is the last vacant lot within this corner that was planned to be developed, I guess, back in the either the late 70s or early 80s, I believe. That was before my time. But the homes, the detached homes that are shown on this plan with that DR1 zoning on this block, those were constructed during my tenure as zoning administrator. The townhouses to the south were before my time. And I don't know the whole history of this development, but I know that the original plan had for this community parking lot, which is actually located back here. This is a community parking lot for people to use and access by this private street right here off Montague. And each of these homes on Halsey Boulevard has their driveway access for parking from that private street. So no driveways on Halsey or Montague or Lockwood Drive exist. So here's an aerial view showing the vacant lot right here and the detached homes within this corner area of, I guess, the northwest corner of this block. And you can see Ashley Commons is shown here. That I'm not sure that's the name that the neighbors, the residents use, but that's the way it's labeled on the city record. And that's that private street. So here's a site plan showing the proposed house. Halsey Boulevard is at the top of this site plan view. The private street is down here and the driveway access located right here into the ground floor area, which is parking and storage. These homes are within a flood zone, so just backing up, they're within a flood zone. So all of these detached homes have a raised first floor, full story off the ground with parking underneath. And that's what is illustrated here. The shaded areas are the yard space, essentially, for the property. And then you see the porch right here and the stairs that lead down to a walkway that leads out to Halsey Boulevard. And of course, that is a common feature of these elevated homes. You elevate the home a full story off the ground, you need to provide stair access to get to that first floor somehow. And in this plan, they are choosing to do that with this side porch, small side porch, and the stairwell that leads down to that walkway that leads out to Halsey Boulevard, shown in these elevations. So the plans that are in front of you show a house that meets the set or the height limitations of the zoning ordinance. Of course, it will have to go through the BAR and be approved by the board as well, but from a zoning standpoint, it satisfies the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And again, in street view, you see how it relates to the two existing homes to the north and those townhouses to the south. Similar in height to the two homes to the north, a little bit taller than the townhouses to the south, but similar. And then another view, a street view from Halsey Boulevard showing those two existing homes to the north of the vacant lot here. And again, the stairs are a prominent feature on these homes. They contribute to the lot occupancy, the overall lot occupancy of the homes. And you see the home behind the vacant lot, 42 Halsey Boulevard, which is located on that private street. And its large stair access up to the ground, well, the first floor of the home and the parking underneath that home. So the applicant, in preparing for this application, did communicate with me about lot occupancy limitations, because that's obviously an important restriction to consider when designing a home on this property. And my message to them was that the other homes that I was familiar with did receive variances from the board when they were built, and the lot occupancies, I believe, ranged into the mid 40s. And so I said, try and keep it in the low 40s and come up with a plan. and make your application with that plan. So they went ahead and did that, and their proposed lot occupancy is 44%. And on this plan view of not only the proposed home, but also the neighboring homes, they have noted the actual or the estimated lot occupancies for those homes. And I know that the home to the north, 44 Halsey Boulevard, has a lot occupancy of at least 43%. There, the applicant's estimate in this case is 50%. I'm not sure it's quite that high, but it is in the range of what, certainly in the range of what's being proposed on 42 Halsey Boulevard. And then 46 Halsey Boulevard also exceeds that limitation. The estimate is 43%. I could not find a file on that one. The file on 44 Halsey is a little bit incorrect because the applicant, back when they did go through the board and get their proposal approved, gave us the wrong lot size. And then the townhouses to the south are a little bit over 50%. This shows 53%. And the zoning requirements for those types of units, which are allowed within the zoning district, have a limit of 50%. So the 53% estimate, I believe, is pretty accurate. And then moving on, the home to the rear of 42 Halsey is 97 Montague, this home right here. And this is that private street providing access, internal access to these homes for parking. But for 97 Montague, according to this estimate, has a lot occupancy of 41%. And then 95 Montague, 93 Montague, both, according to this estimate, exceed that 35% limitation as well, 37% on one and 38% on another. So, and I know that these homes have received variances in the past when they were built. I don't believe there was any objections to these requests when they went through. It's been a number of years since the last one went to the board. And this lot has just been sitting here for whatever reason. But the applicant also did obtain letters of support from neighboring property owners. So 44 Halsey Boulevard, they have no objections to this plan. They've seen the plans and they have no objection to it. Norman and Gloria Smith. And then we have 41 Berry Street, Amy Michelle Freilinger, again, has no objection to this request. 42.5 Berry Street, I believe these are homes on the back side of this lot, of this block. 42.5 Berry Street, Ann and Greg Pryor, no objections. And Mr. Buchanan, Dr. Buchanan at 68 Montague Street. And Milton Thomas, 46 Berry Street. And Marianne and Timothy Colbert, 104.5 Rutledge Avenue. That's a 2-page letter. So those letters were submitted by the applicant as well in support of their application. Our recommendation is for approval. I go back to the this illustrates building locations, and you can see that the buildings typically hug that north side property line and then don't meet the south side setback or the west side setback. So that is a common theme. with how these homes have been sited and built on these lots, and this proposed home would continue that as well. And and of course, the setback on the south side is minimized by the, it would otherwise meet the requirement except for the porch, that one-story porch off the side of the house and the stairs coming down. So if it weren't for the elevated house being that far off the ground, the setback on that south side could probably be minimized. And in terms of the impact of that setback, this illustrates pretty clearly that the body of the house, that 3.5-story section, is meeting the setback requirement off the south side. It's just that porch and stairwell, as I mentioned, that encroach. Then you have the lot occupancy issue. And again, if we look at the information submitted by the applicant, which I believe is fairly accurate, the proposed lot occupancy here is in line with what you approved in the past for those surrounding properties. And so it would be unreasonable to hold this property to a higher standard. So for those reasons, I recommend approval of this request, and I believe there is some opposition.
Eddie recommends approval. There is opposition. Is the applicant present?
And Penny, who are we promoting?
Ashley, yeah, Ashley Jennings.
And Colin Colbert?
Yeah, Colin Colbert.
Okay.
Mr. Batchelder, would you please swear the applicant and those in favor, swear them in?
Okay, I see Ashley and I see Colin. Is there anyone else that will be
Lindsay Colbert.
anyone else speaking on behalf of the application? Colin?
Just Lindsay Colbert.
Okay.
Okay.
We promote her as well. Okay, see Lindsay. So, okay, let me just swear all of you in at once. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. And let me just point out that all of your slides that you submitted are now on the PowerPoint. If you'd like me to refer to any of those as you go, just let me know.
The applicant has 10 minutes to make the total presentation. Thank you very much. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'll just mention that Lee did a really good job of presenting our project already. So maybe he'll circumvent the time. I'm Ashley Jennings. I'm the architect on the project, but I wanted to introduce Lindsay Colbert, and she and her and Garrett are owners of the property. I'd like for them to just speak briefly about what their intentions are for the lot.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashley. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm Lindsay Colbert, and this is Garrett Vogley. As Ashley mentioned, we're the owners of the 42 Halsey lot. We have been looking for property in Charleston for several years now, and we're so thrilled to find this lot late last year. Both my parents and my brother live in Charleston, and after living 1,000 miles away from them for the last 10 years, cannot wait to relocate to Charleston and be closer to them for the future. This lot was particularly exciting to us because it's located just a few blocks from both of their homes. And today we're requesting a variance that will allow us to build a home here similar in size to the surrounding homes, as Lee mentioned. And we really want this to be our forever home where we can raise our future family. And being granted this variance will allow us the space to do that. We really look forward to joining the Charleston and Harleston Village neighborhoods. And I think from there, Ashley, if you want to cover the more technical details of the application, that would be
great. Thanks, Lindsay. Lee, could you advance the slides to sheet 8, 1.0?
Did I skip it already?
I think it's the second slide in the presentation. There you go. Oh yeah, it seems to be cropped. I think this,
Two slides.
just to start off, this is a vacant lot with a very defined precedent of design on the neighboring lots. And most of the properties are new construction. So that makes this property a little unique in that it's the precedent in this neighborhood is for nonconformance. Because of that, there's some other things, there's some other extenuating circumstances on the property that limit the development. And this is a good slide, Lee, here. If you can see that dashed line on the south side of the property, there's a 10-foot utility easement on the property. And there's also a narrow shared road access. All of the neighbors in this area share that unnamed road as a private road, and they all pay into the road maintenance. And so there's definitely some concern about traffic on the road and how the road is maintained because it is a private road. And so, the other side of that is that because it's narrow, turning into your driveway, getting your 2 off-street parking spaces are a challenge. And so as you can see, we've shifted the building to the front of the lot to be able to accommodate that 10-foot utility easement and also access to the area below the house, since the house has to be elevated a full story above grade. So the 10-foot utility easement and the narrow road are 2 of the unique challenges on the property. Also, being in a FEMA zone, as y'all know, having to elevate the structure a full story above grade and get some sense of entrance on the house is difficult. It's a challenge to put a full story of staircase on the exterior of the building. Many of these conditions apply to the other properties in the immediate vicinity. So you can see that most of the properties are non-conforming and have received variances because of the challenges for these size lots and the issues that face them with the FEMA. We believe that the lot coverage limits and the setbacks may unreasonably restrict the configuration of the house on the lot. And we are working really hard with Lindsay and Garrett to be sure that we give them what they really, truly want to have as far as a residence goes. We believe that the residence as designed meets the character of the immediate context, and it'll require a BAR review. So there'll be a second review of this property based on the aesthetic and the height, scale, and mass of the structure. So we believe within the variance framework that the design will won't negatively impact the neighbors. We did have an opportunity to meet with a lot of the immediate neighbors and talk to them about their concerns. We feel like there are some restrictions to the view corridor that are created when you build a house on a vacant lot that has a view of the water. And that's unfortunate for all of the neighbors, but we feel like that's not something that the BZA typically takes into their purview. So Lee, if you just want to flip through the slides just to show everybody what the proposal is. This is the site plan. And the next slide are the floor plans. And as you can see, it's a small footprint. So there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of access to separate floors for different uses. This is your living room on the elevated first floor. Next slide. And here you can see on the elevated second floor is smaller bedrooms, children's bedrooms, an office and a playroom. And then as you can see on the top floor, you have the master suite and master bath in the attic. And the intent here was to, from an aesthetic standpoint, to follow the lead of the other properties on this street on Halsey and to take advantage of the wide berth that they have on the north side of the lot, or the west side of the lot where they see the water. We have pinched the building in a little bit to locate the mechanical units further away from the north property line. Next slide, please. And these are the sides where we are able to put a lot of glass. Next slide, please. And then once again, this is a streetscape and shows the context that we're dealing with. And this is just a reminder of why we feel like this property is well suited for the neighborhood. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions from the board? Thank you very much, Ms. Jennings. Is anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to the application?
Yes, Mr. Robinson, Patrick Flynn.
Would you please promote him?
And if you just want to make them able to speak, that's fine. You don't have to promote them to be panelists.
This is Patrick Flynn. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mr. Flynn, let me swear you in.
All right.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed, Mr. Flynn.
Well, thank you. And I'm certainly happy to have my picture on the camera, but I'm also happy to, if you just want to hear my voice. So that's up to you. First of all, I wanted to just clarify for the record that as some of you may know, I'm an attorney in Charleston, and I have lived in 97 Montague Street for past 16 years with my wife. But I am not here as an attorney representing anyone. I'm here as an affected adjacent property owner. And in addition to our house at 97 Montague, we also own, as it turns out, the unit D1 of those townhomes, which is the first townhome, which is directly adjacent to this lot. So I'm really affected. My wife and I are affected on two counts here with this. So that's why I am here speaking. Now, in addition to our objection, I have spoken with our other neighbors, that's units D1, 2, and 3. So all 4 townhome owners, including us, are objecting to this variance. Now, Dr. and Mrs. Smith at 44 Halsey, I saw that they had offered a letter in support, and I would note for the record that really they are now living in Bishop Gadsden, and this home at this point is just a vacation home for them. So they're not really affected on a day-to-day basis. So one initial item before I begin, and this is something Mr. Batchelder can look at. I thought that I heard him say that there was a 7.4 foot setback and a 10.3 foot total setback. And looking at the application, I don't know that that's correct. I may be misreading it, and I would ask Mr. Batchelder to verify that. But on the variance application, which I looked at online, it says ordinance requires a minimum northeast side yard setback of 9 feet. That's a 12-foot combined, and the proposed structure encroaches into the combined setback 5 feet 2 inches with an exterior stair element. So he may be correct, but I just wasn't sure if those are the accurate numbers that he had referred to earlier. Our position, and this, as I said, I'm not the attorney for my neighbors, but they have asked me as a neighbor to voice their concerns. And our concerns are primarily that this is a small community, which is completely built out except for this one lot. And so the mass of development directly affects all of us. We do have that small common street, which is known, you may see it referred to as Wasby Lane on some of the city's official documents. That's incorrect. It's actually known as Ashley Commons. And that's a privately owned road, of which 44 and 42 and 46 Halsey are all members of the road association. So our residents at 97 Montague and all of the townhomes are directly affected by this development. Yeah. I was struck by the distinction between this application and the previous one that the board just heard at 62 Church Street, and really they couldn't be more different. And 62 Church Street really presented a compelling argument as to livability, and it was an oddly shaped lot surrounding them, and it's a 213-year-old structure which had significant limitations on livability. And this, on the other hand, as I said, this is completely different than that. This is a rectangular lot, similar in nature to the ones next door to it, similar in nature to the 97 Montague. And there really are no conditions which are distinguishable about that lot. And I draw, of course, attention to the application requirements. Number one, that there be extraordinary and exceptional conditions. And we really, that's what the neighbors and I have been looking for is, well, what are those extraordinary and exceptional conditions which would compel us to agree to more footprint or greater footprint than is allowed by the zoning ordinance? And we just have not heard that. I heard the architect for the applicant state that she's really worked hard with the applicants. They've worked really truly hard to get what they really truly want to have for their residents. Well, that's not the standard. And all of the neighbors in 85 Montague and I as well, in position that the zoning ordinance has to mean something. And I understood Mr. Batchelder to say, well, all of the other homes have exceeded the footprint limit, and so for that reason, it really would be unfair to hold this to a different standard. Well, you know, that with respect to Mr. Batchelder, that is not the law. That is not the standard by which I think, or my neighbors think, should be the standard by which the board should measure this application. Indeed, I personally went through when I was provided a copy of this application, and I went through and looked at all the plats to see, well, what are the percentages on these various neighboring properties? And they do vary from 38% for 93 Montague, 36% for 95. Ours at 97 is 40%, and 46 Halsey is 40%. Now the one outlier is 44 Halsey, and I wanted to talk about that for just a moment. When Mr. Batchelder indicated, I believe, that he wasn't aware of any objection, I beg to differ with him on that, because that occurred in the 2007-2008 timeframe, and I apologize, I don't have the exact date, but I can verify that there was opposition because I opposed it. And that residence at 44 Halsey was an example of a developer coming in, and he represented to the board at that time that he had, it was his desire to live in this residence with his family, and that he had an aging mother who had special needs for access and those sorts of things. And on that basis, he was asking for a variance to exceed that 35% footprint. And I objected based upon the same objections that we have today as to the visibility of the river to all of these, the impact it would have on Ashley Commons Road, and sure enough, what had happened in that case was, I believe that the board granted that based upon his statement, that developer's statement, as to the exceptional circumstances, which was would it be unreasonable for the board to hold him to that 35% and not allow his aging mother with certain handicaps to live in there and fulfill her life. Well, of course, what happened? The developer stopped building that house, and to my knowledge, never intended to live there with his aging mother. And the house sat empty for a couple of years when it was eventually bought by Dr. and Mrs. Smith in 2010. Now, that doesn't have any bearing upon this current application. And I'm not suggesting that these are making any misrepresentations. I absolutely am not. I believe that they are being truthful, but I point that out because Mr. Batchelder indicated there was no objection. Well, there was objection, and I objected to it for the same reason, that our view of the Ashley River is precious, and it is a major component of the value of our property at 97 Monmouth. And I'm speaking on behalf of 97 exclusively at this point. We bought 97 with the expectation that the ordinance would be enforced. And the ordinance is for 35% lot coverage. When you look at it, the big picture here, what we're being told by the city at this point is, well, you know, your house was built in 1997. Somebody got an exception that allowed an extended footprint. Well, it just wouldn't be right then if you didn't consent or you didn't have to live with an extended footprint right in front of you. Well, you know, put yourselves in my position that every square foot put in front of me takes away from our view and enjoyment of the river, which is everything in this. Now, again, we don't make any argument at all that the applicant is not entitled to build a structure, and we welcome them to the neighborhood. But we take the position that there just is no justification to allow this footprint to be exceeding the 35% limit, which is what is in the code, and there is a specific guidance for the board that you have to find that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions. There simply are none in this. And I would suggest that while they say, well, this is going from 35 to 44, that's a 9% increase. Well, no, not really. It's really, they want their footprint to be 25% greater than it should be, which is adding 9% to a 35% footprint is making a bigger footprint by 25%. So every square foot of that is directly contrary to the value of our house. And to simply be dismissive of our concerns and the other neighbors is unfair to us, because what are we getting out of this? That, you know, they're taking away from our view without showing any extraordinary exceptional conditions. And with that, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Batchelder, I thank you for your time, and I'm certainly willing to answer any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. I don't know, maybe my fellow board members heard it, but I had difficulty pinpointing what the hardship is to the unit D1 and also the hardship to your property.
Well, and am I still on speaker? Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I certainly the hardship to my property, 97, you can see it clearly from the photograph there, is that we have a view of the river, and for every square foot of space that is taken up in that lot in front of us, whether that be by a staircase or other structure which goes into the setback where it would be an excessive amount, that's what hurts us directly. the value of our house is, that's an integral component of the value of our house. So really it is our property rights are taken by allowing someone to exceed the, to intrude into our visibility access for the river. Now, with respect to the unit D1, I think that every one of those 4 unit owners also has a similar value to the visibility of the river, and it is within their rights to object to exceeding this footprint when there's just no justification to do so. So if we're talking about fairness, that's one thing. But there is no fairness to 97 Montague by granting this, and there is no unfairness to holding the applicant to what has been enacted by the City Council. So all I'm asking is that we adhere to this standard by which to measure this application and deny it, because there just is no extraordinary and exceptional conditions.
Any other questions?
It seems to, oh, sorry, Mr. Robinson.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I hear the concern about the view and the impact on your property value, but it just seems to me that putting anything on this lot, regardless of footprint, would have that same impact.
Absolutely. You're correct. It certainly will. But that's my point, is that with every square foot that is added to that is a decrease in the value of my property, when you think about it. And we bought this house at 97 based upon, as all the others did, based upon the notion that there's a 35% limit to the footprint. Well, when there was a showing of exceptional need by 44 Halsey, a variance was granted. But I think that we're entitled to our expectation and our reliance on the ordinance as it stands when there's just been no showing otherwise. So, that's what I'm trying to convey, is that I think that the applicant has a burden to show that there is some reason to go above that. And simply wanting more square feet in one's residence respectfully does not meet that standard. And granting it without meeting that standard harms my property interest.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Hearing none, we will provide the applicant with 5 minutes to rebut.
I have one question first. Can someone just confirm what the lot occupancy is at that 44 Halsey? Is it 50%?
I believe that the lot occupancy is at least 44%, and this shows a 50% lot occupancy, but I believe that it is, according to my records, at least 44% at 44 Halsey Boulevard.
That's what I heard, and then I saw that said 50. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Jennings?
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize. I wasn't trying to mislead anybody with the numbers on this contacts map. We worked from GIS, and really the intent was not so much to focus on the numbers, but to focus on the scale of the properties relative to the lot size. And I know that that's something that typically comes at BAR and not at BZA, but I think is important for this proposal. Just to respond to Mr. Flynn's concerns, we did meet with the neighbors in a Zoom meeting a few weeks ago. And typically when we meet with neighbors, at least when I meet with neighbors as an architect, I usually ask the neighbors to comment on the elements of the design that are negatively impacting them and how we might make a compromise. And in this case, we didn't get any feedback like that. And so it's difficult for us to resolve issues with neighbors when they're not speaking about the design language. You're talking about certain types of features of the building that would impact them negatively. So it's difficult, number one, to look at the increase in footprint as to impacting a view. We don't typically think about view when we're working on projects because once again, that's not something that's part of the variance test. But I think that if we were to reduce the footprint of this property, I'm not sure it would do anything to improve Mr. Flynn's view, unfortunately. The other thing that I think is important to note is when we talk about extraordinary and exceptional conditions to this property, the lot is small. There's a utility easement setback. There's a navigability issue to getting the cars onto the site. And then you also have the FEMA issue. So I think that, that condition applies to every single property in the immediate vicinity. And so that is why these other properties are non-conforming. And so while this property isn't unique in this neighborhood, every single one of these properties has those same conditions and they've all been granted variances. And
Any questions for Ms. Jennings?
I just want to clarify one thing. I believe Mr. Batchelder said, and either one of y'all can answer it. So as far as the lot occupancy, is what you said that if it weren't for the stairway and the porch, that it would actually meet the lot occupancy? Is that what you said?
No, the porch is the only element that requires the side back variant, but the side yard setback variance. But the footprint of the building, including the front porch, would still exceed the 35% lot coverage without that stair element.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one. I'm curious if, just from a number standpoint, if you remove the front porch off the front, it would have no other impact, but would it resolve the 35% setback? Or I'm sorry, the 35% limitation?
It would. And keep in mind, that's not heated square footage, but we're including it as part of the lot coverage because it exceeds 30 inches above grade.
Great, thank you.
Would the board be interested in having me read the requirements for approval?
Yes, please.
Pardon me?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Robinson, I would like that.
First, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. Second, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. Third, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And authorization of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. I think Mr. Flynn has made his case based upon the fact that this building is being constructed will be moving into the setback. And the setback otherwise would be clearance where he would have a view toward the water from his house, which is to the east of this proposed construction. So that is what I believe he is hinging his argument on.
Oh, I also heard him say that he didn't feel, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he said that he didn't feel that there were extraordinary conditions in regards to the lots and the other properties adjacent to it.
Well, that's why I read the requirements.
Right.
for the board to, in their infinite wisdom, to decide whether the case Ms. Jennings made about there being an easement, a utility easement that pushes the footprint around a little bit and requires movement into a portion of the required setback.
Mr. Robinson, could we hear Mr. Batchelder's, if he could do a quick summary of the, of his analysis?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Batchelder?
Well, first of all, I believe that the proposal for this last vacant lot in this development to hold them to the actual setback requirements and the lot occupancy limitations would be unreasonable, number one, because we haven't done that with the other single family detached homes. For better or worse, those decisions were made, and it is what we have today. So to suddenly change and say, no, you've got to meet the requirements, period, I think would be unreasonable. So then the question is, well, what's reasonable? And given what we have around the property, I think it would be reasonable to expect that the lot occupancy should be held to low 40%, in the low 40% range. And I think that the fact that this is the last vacant lot within this development is a extraordinary and exceptional condition. And so I think they meet the variance test in that regard. In my opinion, I understand the impact on the neighboring property, Mr. Flynn, the encroachment into the setback of those stairs and porch relative to the other homes that have been constructed seems pretty minimal, because other homes have the main body of the house as well as the stairs encroaching in many respects. So I think, it just seems to me that it's hard to change the rules and say, no, you've got to meet these requirements, period. I think some extent of variance is warranted. So I just feel like this is a reasonable request. If you remove those stairs and that porch that encroach into that setback, I think that would get the lot occupancy down a few percent, I believe. But obviously you can't do that, and it certainly would remove the encroachment. But then what do you do for access? This doesn't seem reasonable to not allow that.
Any other questions? Any motions?
It seems to me that, just say removing the front porch, it's still not gonna, even at a 35% lot coverage, I don't think it's gonna help Mr. Flynn's situation. So in light of what Mr. Batchelder said, I would move for approval.
Move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Judon. Any comments? All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Nay.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Nay.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye by a vote of 5-2. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is B1, 1526 Ocean Neighbors Boulevard in Ocean Neighbors. Request for reconsideration of zoning administrator's decision to deny an STR permit application based on the Ocean Neighbors HOA covenants that prohibit this use, zoned SR2. Mr. Batchelor.
So this is a residential property in a neighborhood called Ocean Neighbors on James Island. And this location map shows the location of the applicant's property within that neighborhood. The neighborhood is entirely within the city. It was developed in the city a number of years ago, and it is subject to Homeowners Association restrictive covenants. The applicant applied for a short-term rental permit, and under normal circumstances, they would be entitled to that permit because they did meet the city zoning requirements to obtain that permit. However, there is a HOA board that administers those covenants, and they advised us at about the same time when the application was filed that the neighborhood covenants prohibited this use. So that began a review of the situation to understand that situation better. And in the end, we determined that the covenants and that communication from the neighborhood's homeowners association board would prevent us from issuing this STR permit. And that was based on this state law, this section from the state of South Carolina code that says if the local planning agency has actual notice of a restricted covenant on a tract or parcel of land that is contrary to, conflicts with, or prohibits the permitted activity, the local planning agency must not issue the permit. So we feel like our hands are tied. The applicant, the neighbor, the homeowner in this case, who applied for the STR permit, wants us to resolve this dispute between her and the HOA board, but we feel like that's not an appropriate place for the city to be, that ought to be something a court takes up. And so that's our position. That's why we turned this down. And Tim Doman is with us tonight, and perhaps he would like to just say briefly a few comments. He's here to represent the board.
I was asked by the city and the city legal department to be available if you wish to go into executive session to discuss this, but I think I would like to hear the presentation of the applicant and anyone in opposition so that I can fully understand the facts that might relate to the legal issues. Of course, it's your decision whether you wish to go into executive session or not.
Thank you. First off, we have the applicant. Is the applicant present?
Yes, the applicant has signed up, Mr. Robinson. Ms. Kuiper.
Would you please swear Ms. Kuiper and Mr. Batchelor?
Yes. So Ms. Kuiper, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. So let me swear you in.
Okay.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I also have my husband here, and I know Craig Bissard would like to speak as well. So
okay.
You want to swear them in?
You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Yep.
Please proceed.
Okay. Yeah, first off, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to the city and zoning department. And we sincerely apologize essentially for our misunderstanding of everything that was required for our 1-bedroom short-term rental. We pay taxes, we live in the house with our children, and we did not realize we needed a permit. I imagine this hasn't been an easy decision, but from day one, Jason Rowe has been absolutely amazing in helping me so that I could fully understand the process. In addition, Lee and Penny have been very helpful as well. They've remained extremely professional, and I'm sure many of them have been annoyed by my many questions. But that being said, I feel the situation is very straightforward, and that the city was not presented with all the facts in the initial application. Nowhere in our covenants is there a prohibition on short-term rentals. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and it does allow up to 2 roomers and boarders with no specification on the duration of stay. And Lee, if you want to fast forward to, I think, the first attachment, that includes Article 7, the definition of the 1 single-family residential dwelling. It's kind of buried in there, but it basically essentially says not more than 2 unrelated and roomers and boarders. It's under the double highlighted section towards the end. My HOA board of directors, I feel, is trying to pass off a board resolution. Lee, if you can pass or fast forward to the next one.
Attachment 2?
Yeah, sorry, attachment 3. I kind of skip around here.
Right.
So you can see the title of this is essentially called a board resolution. If you go to the next page, it's only signed by 4 out of the 5 board of directors. The secretary actually did not sign off on this. And this is a resolution and not a restricted covenant. The document was never ever officially amended into our CCRs and bylaws. And in order for them to amend this into our bylaws and create a restrictive covenant, they would need an 80% vote from the community, which includes over 240 homes. And that's outlined in attachment 3. Sorry, you have to go backwards again, Lee. But you can see that highlighted portion right there where it talks about 80% vote. Sorry, back one more. Yeah, so as part of this one, in the general provisions, it does outline the necessary vote required to make this a restrictive covenant. So I believe the city also goes as far as to define resolutions differently from restricted covenants, as seen in the record of deed feeds that can be found online. And they recorded this simply as a resolution. Our board of directors believes that their resolution is enforceable, but from my understanding, our HOA could also pay $25 to the record of deeds and ban all dogs. My question is though, is that right? I would hope not, because that would be morally wrong in my opinion. I also understand and respect that the board considers that they're protecting and preserving the community. However, per the city ordinance that was created in 2018, it's been proven that STRs provide a means of assisting property owners, keeping properties in good order and repair, which in turn assists in stabilizing home ownership, maintaining property values, and strengthening the economy of the city. Once again, we apologize for the misunderstanding of the permit that was required when we were under operation, but when we maintained our Airbnb listing, we always received superhost status. We consistently received 5-star reviews for the appearance and cleanliness of our home. And in addition, we never once received a complaint or a violation from the HOA. Finally, I believe our board is selectively enforcing other businesses over our 1-bedroom rental. 2 of the board members actually attended an unlicensed and unsanctioned daycare in the neighborhood all of last year, which allowed another teacher and another neighbor or another family member outside of the community to attend. They allow yard sales, food trucks, and all sorts of businesses to advertise on their respective vehicles at their homes. And of those businesses, there are already 16 licensed within our neighborhood. Lee, you can fast forward through that, but there's an attachment I received from FOIA regarding all the licenses in the city. So yeah, sorry, backwards. Oh, and this is the resolution and restrictive covenants, but these are 16 businesses that are listing their homes outside of Ocean or inside of Ocean Neighbors. So by their current logic of prohibiting business activity, I'm just curious if the board is prepared to stop every business activity in the neighborhood. I sincerely hope not, because I think that would be ridiculous. My husband and I bought our home in 2018. We bought with the purpose of the fourth bedroom under the expectation that the fourth bedroom would provide a supplemental income for our family. Due to COVID, my husband's pay has been steadily decreasing. We added a second child, as you can see. We're dealing with a potential stem cell transplant for my husband's leukemia, and the additional income is more necessary than it ever was. And if it was truly prohibited in our CCRs, then we would have never bought the 4-bedroom. We would have bought a 3-bedroom and saved us a significant amount of money as well as headache. So in summary, our CCRs specifically allow roomers and boarders, and we bought that under those covenants, those official covenants. I believe that our board of directors is not a credible source of information, with the exception of the secretary, and have severely overstepped their duties by spreading misinformation. And I would like to reasonably ask that the zoning board reconsider their decisions based off the facts tonight. And then I'll hand it over to Craig Bessard, my neighbor.
Anyone else present would like to speak in favor of the application?
Yes, please.
Have you been sworn in, Mr. Broussard?
No, sir, but I'm ready to whenever you're ready.
Okay, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Please
All right.
proceed.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for your time. I do appreciate it. I know it's been a long day for everyone. I am, as Heidi mentioned, I'm their next door neighbor. So in this case, I feel like I would be the person most affected were they to gain a residential short-term rental permit. And I want to start out by saying that the Kuipers have been absolutely extraordinary neighbors. They've gone above and beyond in all areas. Their yard is probably one of the best looking in the neighborhood. They always keep to all the CCRs and standards. Upon my own review of the CCRs when we first moved in here, I actually agree with the Kuipers with their interpretation of the CCRs as it comes to short-term rentals. I myself have never wanted to do a residential short-term rental, but upon review of the Article 7, Section 1, I believe that the Kuipers interpretation is correct on this. As you saw on the slides, Article 7, Section 1 does state that all lots are to be used for residential purposes and no business or business activity shall be carried out. With this, I do agree that had the Kuipers submitted an application for a commercial short-term rental, then the Homeowners Association Board of Directors would be correct in submitting the language that they provided as proof of a restrictive covenant and requiring the zoning board to deny the permit. However, I don't view this language to be the case. I don't view this language as applicable in the case of residential short-term rentals, which are defined in the city as part of the residential use in the city code, not commercial use. So in my opinion, and I'm not a lawyer, but in my reading of the CCRs and bylaws, I believe that the use would, that the residential short-term rental does fall within the residential use verbiage and does not conflict with the Ocean Neighbors CCRs or bylaws. I feel like this is a point of contention that has maybe been not adequately relayed to both the HOA's legal representation or to the neighborhood as a whole, and meetings that the Kuipers have set up to have a proposal to the HOA board and to the association as a whole continuously. The line between residential short-term rentals and commercial short-term rentals is blurred, and there's never a distinction made between them when the Ocean Neighbors Board of Directors has provided opinions on the matter. So with all this in mind, I would ask that the zoning board reconsider their decision as I do not believe that the Ocean Neighbors policy that was submitted, which states that short-term rentals are akin to hotel commercial operations, is valid in the Kuiper's application for a residential, not commercial, short-term rental. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the applicant? Is there any opposition?
Yes, Mr. Robinson, there's an attorney for the HOA organization that will represent the HOA, Mr. Dean, Derek Dean.
Please swear in the opposition.
Mr. Dean, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Batchelder, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Batchelder. As noted, I am General Counsel for Ocean Neighbors Homeowners Association and have been for a number of years. On a personal note, I also lived in Ocean Neighbors for over 15 years. I raised both of my boys there, and not to be flippant, but it's called Ocean Neighbors, and it's not called Ocean Strangers. You want to know your neighbors. You don't want strangers next door to you every weekend. It's a very family-oriented community. There's lots and lots of young kids, as you can tell when Ms. Kuiper got on camera. And this community isn't and wasn't intended for short-term or transient temporary housing. I don't know how many members of the board have taken the drive down Folly Road, but as you can tell from the exhibit that Mr. Batchelder has up, this neighborhood's a closed loop. There's one means of ingress and egress. Like I said, lots of kids, and want to do as much as we can to preserve those family values that the Homeowners Association was built for. And Ms. Kuiper makes much of an alleged conflict between the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions and the short-term rental board policy resolution that was recently recorded. But I don't think that there is a conflict, and I would assert that to the board. As Mr. Bouchard said, Article 7, Section 1 of the Declaration says that all lots are to be used for residential purposes. It also says no business or business activity shall be carried on upon any lot at any time. I believe that this prescriptive language is broad enough to prohibit the owner's proposed use of her property. Persons transacting to stay in the owner's property a night or two are not residents. They're not boarders. They're not roomers. And if you review her appeal, I would take the position that the receipt of payment for same is obviously the transaction of a business activity. She insists in her appeal that she doesn't take payment on site, that she takes payment via a website. And I think that's a specious argument to be made. In addition to the previously cited section of the Declaration, there's also a section in the HOA's bylaws, Article 16, Section 1. It says only one single-family residential dwelling shall be permitted on a lot, and not more than one family may occupy any such dwelling. The additional caveat to that, as Ms. Kuiper pointed out, is that it does allow up to two, quote, unrelated roomers or boarders, and I would, end quote, but does not mention transient or temporary occupants. This is not people, roomers and boarders doesn't refer to people coming in town to spend the weekend so they can go out to Folly Beach and have a drink. Now, there is a short-term rental policy that was unanimously enacted by the board in May of 2018. The owners were notified of this policy on May 21st, 2018, and it was memorialized in the board's June 7, 2018 meeting minutes. It was only recently recorded with the county on June the 4th, 2021, but again, dates back approximately 3 years. The recording requirements are set forth in the relatively new South Carolina Homeowners Association Act. And albeit the policy probably should have been recorded in a more timely fashion, it was consistent with the procedures and policies that the HOA had followed over that period of time. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm of the opinion that the HOA can and should rely exclusively on Article 7, Section 2. That seems pretty clear to me. But the board is further authorized by the bylaws to enact rules and regulations to augment and supplement the existing governing documents. And that is what they have done in this instance. And for that reason, the Homeowners Association, via its board, is opposed to the approval of this or any other short-term rental applications filed either by Ms. Kuiper or any other owner in Ocean Neighbors Homeowners Association. And for those reasons, we would ask the board to uphold the initial denial of the SDR permit application in conformity with the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 6-29-1145. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Dean? Is anyone else present wish to speak in opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no one else has signed up in opposition.
I'll call on the applicant and offer 5 minutes of rebuttal to Mr. Dean's presentation.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One thing I did want to point out, Lee, I'm actually not able to access the link anymore, but there were several neighbors that also replied in the comment section in favor of our application. I'm not sure if you're able to pull that up, but I just want to make note of that.
I'll just note for the record that all
Okay.
the comments that we received prior to the deadline today were forwarded to the board members.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I just try and keep this brief. I think it's very simple. Once again, we even Mr. Dean admitted to this. Our CCRs do allow up to 2 roomers and boarders, and there's no duration on that time of stay. I believe our HOA is misinterpreting the CCRs by stating that their 2021 resolution is a recorded covenant. Lee, I didn't really harp on this one as well, but if you could fast forward to the record of deeds clarification on a restricted covenant versus a resolution. I think it's
You have
towards
to
the
tell
end
me
of
where
my
that is.
attachments. Yeah, keep going. Keep moving forward. Keep going, keep going. Right here. Up, back one more. So as you can see, this is the South Carolina recording fees. And once again, what they have is a resolution, and right below it is a restrictive covenant. And I don't believe what they're trying to pass is just misinformation to many of the community members who believe this is actually a restrictive covenant. And I understand we don't believe in commercial STRs in our neighborhood at all. We don't want strangers. But that being said, we are a family. It's a family of 4. We live in this house. We are renting out 1 bedroom. You know, we meet all the requirements, as Mr. Batchelder mentioned, and it's a very extensive kind of list of requirements that are needed for that. And this was done back in 2018. The actual review of allowing short-term rentals in Zone 3. I also just want to mention that, you know, they keep mentioning business activity, but from my understanding, there's also another short-term rental property operating within the neighborhood who has never once received a violation. And the fact of the matter, it allows 2 roomers and boarders. This was amended back in 2008 to include that statement to clarify that I believe renters were allowed, because why would they allow long-term renters at the same time? And finally, I just want to mention that the board has never once given my husband and I notice that this was a quote unquote resolution was created. You know, in order for the HOA to enforce their CCRs and bylaws as they read, they would need the official community vote of the 240 community members, which would be which they would need 80% to include the 6-month or 12-month duration or whatever they want it to be in order to be restricted, in order to have short-term rentals restricted. And that's it.
And if anything's ambiguous, it falls in our favor.
And in addition, there's notice in my application, but there's several case laws that we have found that if you do find that it's ambiguous, the business activity versus the 2 roomers and boarders, usually in case law, we've found that it will go to the more certain verbiage of the CCR. So essentially the 2 roomers and boarders in this case, which it's in the same clause as the residential use of lots where no business activity is included. And essentially it would be a free use of property. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Kuiper? That closes the public hearing portion of the meeting. The chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
I move, Mr. Robinson, we go into executive session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Bennett.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. Thank you very much. We will go into executive session.
Now, just for everybody's reference, there is a dial-in number for the executive session. Does everybody have that number? You'll need to turn mute on Zoom. I can't give out the number and the access code here in public session, or everybody will have it. I believe I have your email addresses from an earlier email. I can send those to you.
I think we sent that out to everybody.
Yes, we did, Mr. Batchelder.
With which of the 4 emails today did you send it?
Who's that email from, Penny?
Yeah, Mr. Morrison, it came from Mr. Valentine, Scott Valentine today.
Okay. All right, I'm looking at Scott's second email to me. I got 2 from him. I don't see it. Tim, do you have my email? You could send it to me?
I thought I did. What is it again?
It's H. Morrison at HSB Law Firm.
Yeah, let me get.
I also did not receive that.
Yeah,
email.
I didn't get it either.
I don't have it.
I don't have it.
I don't have it.
I think I have everybody's email. Allie's, Mike Robinson, John Bennett, Robin Richards, Ms. Vargas. I believe this is everybody. Let me try and shoot this all to you.
Okay.
Apologies, I have a quick question. Is this executive session allowed for the applicant as well, or it's just?
No.
Okay.
Okay, I hit the send just now. Double check that everybody's got it.
I got it.
Got it.
Me too.
Just remember to mute yourself on the Zoom call. Come on in on the other side.
I got it.
I got it. I got to get in. 7, 2, 3, 6.
Yeah, I'm coming to get.
Seven, 4, 7, 5, 1.
Mr. Jadon, would you mute your screen?
Keep everybody back on board now.
Yeah.
Everybody back on?
Yes.
I see Mr. Morrison, Ms. Vargas. Heard Mr. Judon, there he is. Ms. Grass?
I'm here.
Okay, Ms. Richards,
I'm here.
Mr. Bennett.
I'm here as well.
We have everyone. Is staff back on?
Yes.
Yes.
And the applicant in opposition, they on?
Yes, I'm on. Applicant's on.
I'm still on, Derek Dean.
We ready to proceed, Lee?
Sure.
We were in executive session. We received some legal advice. No decisions were made, no votes were taken. This is a very complicated issue. I've been on the board 30-something years and never encountered anything quite like this or anything near this. It's not like we're here to interpret ordinances that have been written by city council, and it's not an ordinance that appears on the books. It's more of a judicial question, more of a legal question. And we really, that's not what we are here to do. I find it very difficult to make a response for the benefit of the board. I find it difficult to make a response to one side or the other because our ordinance doesn't give us guidance. That's the way I feel about it. Any other comments?
Mr. Robinson, for me, I think somebody else, i.e. a court, needs to decide what rumor and border means, and why there is a section on a prohibition on businesses and a separate section on rumors and borders, and whether that means that whether the latter means short-term rentals are permitted. That's what I'm struggling with.
Anyone else?
I don't know if I have the opportunity to talk. This is the applicant.
No, it's the public hearing portion. The meeting's over. Any other comments from the board?
If you're entertaining motions, Mr. Robinson, I move we defer this, allow it to play out in judicial forum.
Can I ask for a modification, Mr. Morrison, that be deferred until such time as there is some kind of a judicial determination? I don't want it to be deferred just till next meeting.
I would accept that amendment.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Is there any discussion, any comments on the motion in second? All those in favor signify by saying, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Thank you very much and good luck. Next item on the agenda is 200-210 Spring Street West Side. Request first one-year extension of a vested right that expires on October 1st, 2021, pursuant to section 54-962. Vested right pertains to a special exception granted under section 54-220 on October 1, 2019, with conditions for a 152 unit accommodations use in a MU-2/WH mixed use workforce housing zone district. Mr. Batchelder.
We believe this meets the criteria for granting a one-year extension and recommend that you grant this extension.
The city recommends for approval. Is anyone present wishes to be heard on this? Is there any motion?
There's no opposition.
No opposition. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 10 Cypress Street, East Central. Request variance from section 54-317 to allow construction of an office building with 1,964 square feet of office space with 3 off-street parking spaces, 4 spaces required, zone limited business. Mr. Batchelder.
So this application concerns a vacant lot, zone limited business, so it's a commercially zoned property. And according to this location map, you can see it's on Cypress Street. Cypress turns into Brigade, so it's also identified in some documents as a Brigade Street address, but it's technically, I think it's on the Cypress Street section of the street. And it is located directly adjacent to the east side of the Interstate 26 overpass as it crosses over Cypress Street. And it will be located next to the low line, which is runs along that I-26 corridor as well. And that is a city-owned property that will be improved as a linear park. It was impacted by the expansion of I-26 when the Ravenel Bridge was built because the neighboring property went away. You see the zoning for that property that is now part of the I-26 right-of-way shown on this map. But anyway, so this sits there vacant. This aerial view again shows the location relative to those other features around it. And so we're left with this commercially zoned properties fronting on Cypress at this location. The proposal to construct an office building, in fact, the same proposal went before the board a few years ago and was approved. We had recommended for that proposal. And just very briefly, the property allows a 2.5-story building. We think the 2.5-story building is an appropriate building for this location. And there's no other way to fit more parking on that site unless you decrease substantially actually you could not do that because there's no way on this 30-foot wide lot to park parallel to the street and be able to turn around and pull out. So these parking spaces do offer that opportunity. They can back up and maneuver around so they're not backing out onto Cypress Street. So there's really no way to fit more than 3 parking spaces on this property because you can only put these spaces on the property in the manner that's shown here, whether they're pushed further back or can't be any closer to the street and still offer that opportunity to turn around. But so there's no way to provide more than 3 spaces. The building that ends up being allowed, once you eliminate the space for the driveway and the spaces, is shown here, and that is large enough that it would require 4 parking spaces. So that creates the need for the variance. I think the circumstances are, this is an extraordinary and exceptional condition. The other homes nearby or other properties nearby have residential uses on them. There is an office building that is actually under construction down here right now that will provide parking and meet the requirements, but this standalone property can only provide 3 spaces. And so we think the building that's proposed, and I'll show you more slides of that, is reasonable, and the variance will not adversely affect any neighboring properties. There is parking on the street at location as well along that block. So here are floor plans showing 2 floors with the stairs and bathrooms and a half-story on top. This is in an area that will be subject to the review and approval of the BAR. So the building that results will be more detailed than this, but this is just kind of an illustration of the footprint and the massing of that building on this lot. But for all those reasons, we recommend approval of this request.
The city recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Mr. Judon moves for approval, seconded by Ms. Grass. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 430 Meeting Street, which has been withdrawn. Next item is number 5, 1625 Samuel Road, Grimble Shores. Request a variance from section 54-824 to allow subdivision to create 2 lots and to allow Lot A to not have frontage on a public right-of-way, zoned RR1. Mr. Batchelor.
This is a residential property on James Island in the Grimble Shores area. And its location is off of Samuel Road, which is a short street that runs off of Grimble Road, just south of where it intersects with name is escaping me right now, Riverland Drive. So it's in the southern part of James Island. And you can see on this map already that there are some lots around it that have odd configurations, don't have frontage or have very little frontage on a public right-of-way. In the case of this lot, the request is to take this long, narrow lot and subdivide it down the middle. So here's a zoning map with properties with color on them are located within the city limits of Charleston. All the properties that do not have any color are in unincorporated Charleston County. And again, this is a little bit larger area shown on this map, and you see that pattern of some lots not having any frontage or very little frontage, the flag lots, as we call them, exists in this area. This is a plat, proposed subdivision plat, showing the proposed property line that I've highlighted here. And the existing house sits in the back of the property that would be maintained on the new lot A, which is shown here. And then there would be this 20-foot wide easement for access and the sewer and water to that house. And then the front lot will be a new lot for somebody to construct a single family home on. Both of the proposed lots are 0.34 tenths of an acre or hundredths of an acre. And the other thing about this is if you were to subtract that 20-foot easement from the front lot size, it would still be over a quarter of an acre, 0.27 acres to be exact. So these are very large lots relative to the zoning that is in place and comparable to other lots in the area. And so what I've done here, because I'm going to recommend in favor of this, is show you the larger context of this area. And I've got some other views that will help illustrate this as well. But this is in an area of James Island where you have a real mix of lot sizes and shapes and frontages and that sort of thing. And you can see that many of these properties that have no frontage or very narrow frontages are in the county, and they've been permitted under the county's rules. Some of these have been permitted under the city's rules, and we've just kind of followed along in that pattern of how property owners down here have changed their properties. And on this map, I've actually highlighted all of the properties that either have no frontage or have narrow frontages. Now, these are all still large lots. None of these lots are tiny by any means. They're, relatively speaking, they're half-acre lots or at least a quarter-acre lots. And so they're not small. And some of them are quite a bit larger, you can see. So there's a pattern that's been going on here for a number of years. And this owner has owned this property for a long time. I'm not sure how long. I've never heard that, but you have longstanding properties that have been in families, heirs property, that sort of thing in this area. And the applicant did supply some letters with signatures from neighboring property owners. So this is the owner of 1619 Samuel Road, and which is a direct neighbor of 1625. And they agree that this property should be able to be subdivided into 2 parcels. Same consent from the owner of 1940 Grimble Road, also a direct neighbor of these 2 properties. And so here's the aerial view, and you can see that there are some agricultural uses down there. There are 2 Charleston County schools. This is Septima Clark Academy. This is James Island Elementary right here. This is a large property that is under a plan unit development that limits the development of that property and requires a substantial amount of open space. And so anyway, this is a beautiful section of James Island, and what's being requested here with 2 lots, basically almost 4/10 of an acre in size, is not out of character, and I think it would be an unreasonable thing to prevent this size lot from being subdivided as is proposed here. So our recommendation is for approval of this request.
City recommends approval. Is there any opposition, Ms. Ashby?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Motion for approval by Ms. Grass, second by Ms. Richards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number 6, 106 Cooper Street. east side. Request special exception under section 54501 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area is 1,637 square feet, 2,500 square feet required. Request a variance from section 54301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 3.5-foot west side setback, a 13-foot total side setback, having a 50.5% lot occupancy, 9 feet, 15 feet required, and 50% limitation. Zone general business, Mr. Batchelor.
Here we have a lot in the east side, vacant lot, and this location map shows that it is a small, oddly shaped property. It actually is a vacant lot that was left after the, I believe it was not within the right of way of the old Cooper River Bridge the access came off of Meeting Street, but it was impacted by that certainly. But now the neighboring property where the Cooper River Bridge did exist is being developed, and this lot is now proposed to be developed for a single-family home. On the zoning map, you see that this property and the neighboring two properties are general business. Property to the north has a mixed-use workforce housing zoning, which allows for very intense development. Properties on the south side of Cooper Street are zone residential and have residences on them. Here's an aerial view taken earlier this year. You see the existing residences on the south side of Cooper Street in that block, and you see the new Charleston Housing Authority development just to the north. So the proposal for this lot is to build a single-family residence, and right over here you see other lots that have residences on them. Some of these are new. These two homes are new. I think this one may be fairly new too. So, and this is the site plan showing that house. The lot obviously has a hardship because of its size and shape, and so that results in the need for these requests, a special exception for the lot of insufficient size. And the variance is to allow the single-family residence with a narrow west side setback, total side setback, and a large, slightly larger lot occupancy, 50.5 versus 50% limitation. But it will provide off-street parking and be a home that fits within the height limits, which are 2 to 3 story, 2.5 to 3 stories. In this case, 3 stories is permitted because of the width of Cooper Street. So our recommendation is for approval. I think, again, I think it's reasonable to expect that this would be, and ideally be developed for a single family home. It's zone GB, so it could have other commercial uses, but it should be zone G, should be developed residentially given what's around it. So our recommendation is for approval of this request.
City recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, are there any, is there any opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Move approval by Ms. Richards, second by Ms. Vargas Vargas. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Mr. Judon.
Aye.
Mr. Rass.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Ms. Vargas Vargas.
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Ms. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number 7. 16 Church Street, Charlestown. Request a variance from section 54-301 to allow a family room expansion / powder room and closet addition having a 38% lot occupancy, 35% limitation. Existing lot occupancy is 37%. Zone SR4. Mr. Batchelder.
So a residential property on Lower Church Street between Atlantic and Murray Boulevard, or South Battery rather. And the home that sits there is shown on this zoning map. And another view, aerial view of the property. The addition that is proposed is right back here in this location. So on this site plan, the proposed increase in lot occupancy over the existing building footprint is highlighted here. I've highlighted that in yellow. The applicant showed it in the cross hatching. So you can see it's a very small area that is being added, and it's actually going from 36.8% lot occupancy to 38.4%, which is 1.6% of an increase in lot occupancy. Here you see the floor plan. So basically they're enclosing what is right now a one-story porch and adding to that. So here's the location of that porch. And then there's a small addition to the existing footprint just to make that rear building a little bit larger. And then there's this stair addition over here. So that is the, in fact, what the applicant is asking for. And that's a one-story part of the building staying one story. So we're not aware of any objections or concerns, and our recommendation is for approval.
City recommends approval. Ms. Ashby, is there any opposition?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Ms. Vargas moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Bennett. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item is number 830 F Street. That has been deferred. Number 9 is 511 Rutledge Avenue, West Side. Request a use variance from section 54-203 to allow a barber shop on the ground floor with days of operation Monday through Saturday and hours of operation 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. in the DR1F Diverse Residential Zone District. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a property, residentially zoned property that sits on that northwest corner rather of Newton Street and Rutledge Avenue. And you saw something on this recently when there was a proposal to put a dentist shop on this corner that is located just north of the Parkway across town. And that was approved, but the applicant chose not to move forward with that proposal. So property went back on the market, and we've got a new applicant coming forward, and they would like to take this ground floor space that has been a restaurant in the past and been other things in it during its lifetime on this corner store property and make it a barber shop. And you could see that the building sits up front on Rutledge Avenue, and then there's a parking area in the back. And the parking is not an issue. It's simply the use that requires your approval for a use variance, given the residential zoning on the property. So they've submitted the information about their proposed business. And these are photographs showing the existing building. I think the Dell's Uptown, I think that's been closed for a while, I believe. I'm not sure, but I think it's been closed long enough that may have lost that grandfather use. And then view of the back of the building from that parking area. And we've received this letter from the president of the neighborhood association indicating that they're fine with this proposal, that they voted to support it on July 22nd. And we think it's a very good use for that corner property, and it'd be nice to have something back in that building occupying that ground floor. The upper floor is residential. I think it's 2 units, if I remember correctly. And so we recommend approval.
City recommends approval. Is there any opposition, Ms. Ashby?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Motion for approval made by Mr. Bennett, seconded by Mr. Morrison. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Jadon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards?
Aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett?
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is number 10, 24 Sycamore Avenue, Magnolia. A special exception under section 54-110 to allow the expansion of existing non-conforming use daycare center with a 1-story classroom addition zoned SR2. Mr. Bachelor.
This property sits on the corner of Paula Drive and Sycamore Avenue in the Magnolia neighborhood, West Ashley. And for years, it's had a daycare on it, its own residential. And I don't recall if that use was approved in the city, or perhaps it was there and we annexed the property into the city. I'm not sure. I don't recall. But nevertheless, this is what it looks like today. You see the building that has been added on to as a daycare, and you see in the back yard of that building is a playground, and there's a driveway, parking area, and drop off there as well. So here's a view from the street. And what is being proposed is a small addition that would be right over here in this area. And on the site plan, I've highlighted that area where the addition would be. And so it's a small expansion of the existing daycare use. And there's a floor plan illustrating that additional room. So anyway, it's a small increase in the operation. It does require your approval to expand that existing non-conforming use, and we feel that it meets the special exception criteria, and there won't be any adverse impact in terms of parking or traffic or that sort of thing for the small addition that's shown here. So we recommend approval of this request. And I don't believe there's been any opposition to this.
City recommends approval. Any opposition, Ms. Ashby?
No, Mr. Robinson, no opposition.
Mr. Morrison moves for approval, seconded by Mr. Jadon. All in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison.
Aye.
Mr. Jadon.
Aye.
Ms. Grass.
Aye.
Ms. Richards.
Aye.
Ms. Vargas.
Aye.
Mr. Bennett.
Aye.
Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion it is unanimously approved. Next item on the agenda is 31 East Battery. Mr. Bennett will recuse from that, and he may go home.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, John.
31 East Battery, Charlestown. request a variance from section 54-301 to allow a 3-story addition to a main house, a new 2-story detached garage, having a 46% lot occupancy, 35% limitation, existing lot occupancy 39%, zoned SR3. Mr. Batchelor.
This is a residential property on East Battery at Water Street. It's zoned SR3, which again has a 35% lot occupancy limitation. And the existing house occupies 39%. And these are more views of that existing home. Sanborn maps that show the property in the past, and you can see that there have been buildings that are no longer there. So there's a driveway back here right now. And one time there was a building that stretched all the way back, and then a small building here. Then there was a larger building built at some point, and that no longer is there. So what is being requested is the variance to allow a new detached building, accessory building, garage, storage building, bedroom above, to be built in this location, at the back of that existing driveway. And then a new addition or expansion to the footprint of the existing building would go here. And I meant to shade this as well. I thought I had, but I guess it disappeared. So there's this porch and stair that is being added over here. And then this area right here is being added to the footprint. And then there are other additions as well. So I move through these drawings. This is a floor plan, which the applicant can refer to if need be. These were part of the package. And so existing, this is the, oh, wait a minute, that's what I want to show. So this is the proposed accessory building over here, of course, garage and storage on the ground floor, and then a bedroom, bathroom above. And then from the south, the accessory building would have this elevation right here. And then this shows the area of the 3-story addition that is basically an expansion of the building footprint. And so this addition onto the main house plus the accessory building will increase the lot occupancy from 39% to 46%. So those are the two features of these plans, showing a variety of changes that require the board's approval. The other changes, plus these features, these additions, will require the approval of the BAR as well. But for the purposes of this meeting, the only issue is lot occupancy. So anyway, I just want to illustrate how that south elevation is changing. This is also an addition to what is now a 2-story section of the building, but that does not require the board's approval. It does require the BAR's approval, but not the Board of Zoning Appeals approval. And then we have other drawings as well. This is a view from Water Street of that accessory building. And then a view basically from the back property line that this property shares with the adjacent Water Street lot, and showing again the accessory building right here. And then this is, I guess this area right here is the proposed expansion of the building footprint on the main house. So that is in effect what is being requested. And I'm not aware of any objections or concerns to this. In fact, I think the applicant has communicated with other neighboring property owners, and Penny, you can maybe speak to that, but based on my understanding of the situation, which is that there's no objections or concerns that have been expressed by any neighbors, I believe that they meet the variance test and recommend approval of this request. Now, I do think that, the Board of Architectural Review will also scrutinize these plans and look at somewhat of the same issues that maybe we're looking at as well. But anyway, so there's not I really kind of like leaving these matters up to the BAR rather than BZA in some respects, and this one seems like a good candidate for that. But my recommendation is for approval.
City recommends approval. Any opposition, Ms. Ashby?
Mr. Robinson, I'm not aware of any opposition, but I do have that someone has signed up to speak, but they did not indicate their position. And this is Teresa Smythe that signed up to speak regarding this application.
Is Ms. Smythe present?
Yes, I'm present.
Mr. Batchelor, would you please swear Ms. Smythe in?
Ms. Smythe, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Ms. Smythe, are you here to speak on behalf of the application or against it?
Well, when I signed up, Mr. Robinson, I signed up just to make a comment, but I realized as I've watched the entire proceeding tonight that I think it should be against. And by the way, thank you all. Y'all are quite intrepid, and I will be brief because I know it's the last thing on the agenda.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do we want to hear from the applicant first in that case?
Based upon what Ms. Smythe's position is, we'll hear from the applicant first.
Okay, thank you.
And Penny, that is Eddie Fava, correct?
Yes, sir. Eddie Favor.
Eddie, are you present?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you.
Mr. Batchelor, would you please swear Mr. Favor in?
Eddie, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please proceed with what you intend to do, Mr. Favor.
Thank you. Lee, do y'all have my whole set as submitted?
Yes. Let me move forward and go to yes. So here it begins.
Great. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. And again, thank you. I'll try to be brief too. We made a point of speaking to all the adjacent neighbors who are the ones that are most immediately impacted and weren't aware that there was any question or opposition whatsoever. So apologize, but happy to address it. We are working for the new owner of 31 East Battery. And in doing so and examining the existing structure, and you can advance, Lee, there was, and the house is an awesome property, but it's just been under like deferred maintenance for years and literally is falling apart as we speak. The new owner has asked us to examine it and do everything we can to put it back together and do it in a way that is sensitive to the neighbors, the neighborhood, and the house proper. And that's exactly what we have done. It is, and you can advance, Lee. As Lee alluded to, the first thing we looked into was the fact that, as you see on the top left, the 1888 Sanborns and 1902 Sanborns, then going into 1944, 1951, there have always been a series of structures on this property. And historically, the correct or initial approach was to fill in the area along Water Street per the 1888 Sanborn and the 1902 Sanborn. We respectively thought that for the neighborhood and everybody else, what was more appropriate was to address the rear additions and modifications that were made to the property in kind of a haphazard way and on an as-needed basis previously, and leave that open space, and anything that was going back as per the 1944 Sanborn or the 1951 Sanborn with a detached garage structure, that it was smaller and pushed far back to the property line. Next, please. So that's the existing structure, and the areas that you can see to the rear, where you kind of have it all kind of stepping back from the driveway. And I'm sorry, I don't know. I know I can't point to things here, but that's the area that per the photographs is not great, where it kind of dog legs or zigzags back, leave from that projection, to the bay. Exactly. Thank you, sir. Next, please. So as Lee has highlighted, I guess on our plan sheet, the area that we are proposing, the addition is in that one little corner that is tucked back. Again, as he indicated, this will have to go to Board of Architectural Review, and although minimally visible, it will be certainly something that they will look at, as will the garage element. With regard to the request for the variance, and I think it's on one of the earlier sheets, but we don't need to go there in an effort of saving time, that per the lot coverage request, the area that you can see that affects the house increases the lot coverage by 0.5%. It's the garage element, which is smaller than any addition that has been on the house historically and far removed from the street, that increases it the additional 6.5%. Next, please. Again, that's existing plan. We can proceed. It's very chopped up. That's the proposed plan as it would be amended. Next, please. Similarly, that's existing second floor plan, but again, it was a B&B up until recently, and a house. This is going back to single family. Next, please. That is the proposed plan, which allows bedrooms for his children, the owner's children. His quarters will be at the top level. Again, it's going all to single family rather than the current use, which is B&B and single family house. Next, please. Third level, as it is existing. And then next, please. As it will be proposed, the addition element is onto the bottom, as you can see there where it says fitness room and owner's bathroom, which is tucked back in that back portion of the property. Next, please. That's the existing roof plan. And the proposed, which provides for an elevator. He would need assistance and wanted to be able to get to the rooftop element, which the outdoor deck area is not visible from the public right of way, and again would be dealt with at the BAR level. Next, please. So that's the existing front elevation from East Battery as you were facing the property. Next, please. Proposed, you can see how we returned the bay. Per the Sanborn maps, it had always been a 3-story element and noted as such. We returned it to that in this elevation. Next, please. That is the existing north elevation. Next, please. Proposed north elevation, and the addition, which you see in the distance, midway is recessed significantly from the face of Water Street. Our garage structure, which is actually 1.5 stories, is further back than what had been historically there, which had been something of 3 levels that had closed in that whole connection between the existing house and the one to the adjacent to the right that you see in profile. Next, please. That is the current rear of the property. As you can see, kind of a lot of stuff going on, all added at different times. This is from the driveway view, so much of it not necessarily visible from public right of way, although that doesn't affect you all, just for your reference. Next, please. That is the proposed rear elevation, which kind of cleans all that up. Next, please. Then the garden elevation, again, south, which unless you're standing in the garden, the bulk of that you do not see. The bay, which is projecting kind of about 2/3 of the way back from the building, is called out in the Sanborn maps of having been 3-story originally, which is something we would return it to. And to clean up the back end of the house, the part immediately adjacent would go that high as well, which is next, please. Which again is part of the lot coverage variance. Next, please. That, I guess, is illustrating our new carriage house on the right in the distance. And then on the, on the left and on the right is the elevation that backs up to 3 Water Street. Next, please. Okay. All right. Thank you, Lee. The other thing I would like to mention is we, again, as we do with all our projects, put letters out to the neighbors, particularly the ones immediately adjacent to the property. The Coons across the street spent an hour with me looking at it and had no objection. We're fully supportive. 3 Water Street, which backs up to it. Similarly so, I got a comment from Jenny Bush that lives across the street that said that she was mostly concerned when it went to construction and that there was just efforts made that it didn't block the street. And I promised her that if this came up, I would mention it in the zoning and we'll certainly do it in BAR. We also spoke with Historic Charleston Foundation and Preservation Society, both of which who did not have any concerns or objection to the zoning request. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Favor. Any questions, Mr. Favor? Anyone else present who wishes to speak on behalf of the application?
I'd like to just make one more point, and that is that this rooftop element that's being added does not violate any zoning regulations per se. It requires the approval of the BAR, but it does not require the approval of the BZA. So I just want to point that out in case you were wondering.
Thank you. Ms. Smythe, in opposition.
Hey. Oh, good Lord. Stop. Did I just do something?
Hold on, this is not gonna work. You got a lot of feedback, Ms. Smythe. Try it again.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, y'all. I'm a rookie on the technology. I just want to thank y'all for letting me speak. I'm not really talking about the project. I think Mr. Fava is so talented and I think his work is beautiful, but it's the process. We have a variance test that is clear and is clearly not met. The first point of it is that it's got an extraordinary and exceptional condition for this lot that's not anywhere else in the area. And that's not true. If you look at just what he submitted, all the other lots next door, across the street, and even behind are very different. This is a good sized lot with access from Water Street. The Sanborn map is unclear. And of course that's a BAR thing, I think not a zoning thing. And then the other thing is, it says that a test has to be met that the ordinance would prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. It's clearly not true. This property is large. There's no unreasonable restriction on its use. I don't think adding a 10% increase in the lot coverage from what is allowed is unreasonable at all. To add a 1.5 story garage or to disallow a 1.5 story garage is not unreasonable. We're not talking about what the BARs to allow, we're talking about zoning. And I think granting the zoning variance would be a detriment to the public good. We've got a process here. We got a standard that people need to be able to rely upon. And if the standard can just be arbitrarily done away with without really meeting the requirements of the test, then that's a detriment to the public good. So that's my argument. Not that it's not a beautiful revving up of the property, but that this is a big increase in property coverage and there's a hardship test and he hadn't met it. So thank you very much.
Anyone else in opposition?
No one else, Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Favor, would you care to comment on the opposition?
You're muted, Eddie.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, sir, definitely. And I don't know if I can go back to our page. Let's see, Lee. Maybe it's towards the front, A100. I mean, it was kind of color coded. I don't know if that's on.
Did I skip it
No, sir.
already?
No, sir, but I don't see it in the set. It had a existing and a proposed site plan.
I don't know. On one sheet?
Yes, sir. It was sheet A100.
I don't see that.
Well, I can review with it, I think, but I'll go to, I guess, Sanborn's then, and then after that. I think the comment that the Sanborn's, and I don't know exactly or recall what Ms. Smythe said, but were inaccurate or not a proper reference, again, couldn't be more incorrect, because historically, almost every project, whether it's BZA or BAR, we do reference those, and those are the ones that weigh heavily. And the ones that are most impacted by this property are the people on that street. And anything that would be an affront to that street or to them would have certainly been voiced when I met with each of them individually. Similarly with Historic Charleston Preservation Society. And historically, there was something in those locations, and it was significantly more, which is often the case that lets us proceed, at least with the design effort. The thought, though, was out of respect to that neighborhood, rather than try to propose something that changed it significantly from the street's appearance, was that it was tucked back to the rear, which is what the design does. The lot is a corner lot, and as I say, the addition to the house itself increases it by 0.5%. Historically, there was an off-street building, which we are putting back and putting into the rear of the property, which again, there's nothing whatsoever that is a detriment to the neighborhood, as evidenced by those that are most impacted by it, the immediate neighbors who had no objections to this request. The proposed requested footprint lot coverage is less than what had been present prior and historically, and is not detrimental to the neighbors. It's an oddly shaped lot. It's a corner lot that would prohibit a functional accessory structure along Water Street. So, even though historically on top of the Sanborn map, there was something there to go back with something like that, I think that's a disservice to the neighborhood. So I don't think in any way, what shape or form, the process has been disregarded. I do think it warrants these improvements, and it's been justified, and certainly by those that are most impacted by it and living next door to it, and Preservation Society and Historic Charleston, both of whom we met, along with the neighbors, had no issues. So respectfully disagree and request your approval.
Any questions, Mr. Favor? Thank you. Public hearing portion of the meeting is over. Any comments from the board? Any discussion? Any motions?
I move approval.
Second.
Move for approval in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Judon?
Aye.
Ms. Grass?
Aye.
Ms. Richards? Ms. Richards?
Sorry, aye.
Ms. Vargas?
Aye.
Mr. Bennett has recused. Mr. Robinson votes aye. The motion is unanimously approved. And I appreciate Ms. Smythe's comments. I think Mr. Favor answered those comments fairly well as to this particular property and the neighbors being contacted and the historic use of the property and the coverage that the property had in years past. And I believe that issue was covered. It appears to me that this motion was well taken and well passed, well approved. Thank you very much, board, and I will be the first to tell you that we only have one item on the agenda at the next meeting.
Thank you all for your time very much. Good night.
Thank you very much, and see you in a couple of weeks, board.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Everybody.
everybody.
Thank you. Take care.
God bless.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.